go.
I've gone to share. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, just click share now, Mike, and that'll come up. So everyone, just doing that. We're recording today's talk, so just mute yourself or hide your video if you don't want to be included in it. Great, cool. Well, over to you, Mike. Thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, I'm just trying to get the slide to work here, actually. Okay.
Where it says from beginning.
Ah, yes. Thanks, Ben. Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much for that. Yes. Well, thank you, Christoph and Ben, for inviting me to come along to do this. Just to say that my interest in barnacles started about 4 years ago when over 4 years ago when I joined the Co-Coast project, Capture Our Coast, and Ben and Nova, who's watching tonight, I think, gave me some basic training, and after that, I got very interested in barnacles, or Cirripedia, to give it more of a scientific name. So my background is, apart from that, is that over the last 2 years, I've been going more or less weekly down to the Marine Biological Association in Plymouth to do barnacle ID for Nova muscosca, and as part of a competition experiment. So essentially, I've been looking at thousands and thousands and thousands of barnacles for the last couple of years, apart from the on screen, apart from the ones I actually look at in the field. So I think I getting to know the kind of strange idiosyncrasy. So what I'm trying to show tonight is how different the barnacles are on a shore as compared to what you may see online or in a book and a nice neat drawing. Now they can be quite tricky, okay, but they are, with a degree of confidence and some experience, you can start to accurately identify them. So so the first slide, yeah, you know, who cares? It's a stupid barnacle. A lot of people don't know anything about barnacles. They just see these things on rocks everywhere, and you know, fair enough. Why should you show an interest? But actually, when you look at them up close, oh, just to say, this is a lot of barnacles tonight. When you look at them up close, they look completely different, and they're absolutely fascinating. So before we go any further, I would say, if you're out in the field or you're doing a crustacean survey with the Rockpool project, I would say invest in a hand lens. You can get one for a couple of pounds online. They're dead cheap. I mean, this is quite a good one. 10 times magnification, you will see very detailed features. So I would totally recommend going onto a shore, not just to look at barnacles with a hand lens, but anything else you find. It will open up a whole new world. Okay, so just some basic morphology of a barnacle. Tonight, I'm actually concentrating on the 7 species, I should have said this earlier, the 7 species that are listed in the Rockpool Crustacean Survey, which are intertidal species. Basically, there's 9 intertidal species in the UK. A couple of them actually are much more obscure. But the ones I'm going to talk about in a minute actually are ones that you will find around the UK and particularly in the southwest. So we haven't got time tonight to go into great detail about the anatomy of a barnacle, the insider working, which is utterly fascinating, and the life cycle again, which is amazing. So we're just going to look at a couple of simple diagrams to identify. So as you can see, most barnacles actually have six plates, and as you can see on this diagram, we have the carina at the top. We have the rostral plate, usually called the rostral plate, at the bottom, and then we have the lateral. These are the lateral plates here. Okay, so in terms of identification, you would be looking at the configuration of these lateral plates. And the bit in the middle, which is the aperture, or called the operculum. And each species basically has a different shaped operculum. And the really important feature to work with, when I'll show you in a minute, the barnacles are very eroded or very crowded, is to look at this line across here, the horizontal line, which is called the tergal-scutal suture. So basically what you have here, you have 4 plates. So tergum at the top, these 2 plates are tergum, scutum, and then when the barnacle is feeding, or it's expelling waste, or it's it's basically releasing eggs, or it's reproducing with this extremely large penis at some point. It all comes through this opening here when these 4 plates open up. So I'm going to show you a similar diagram now of the different species to show you the difference between the plate configuration, so different species. So this is a very common high water barnacle, Kazama montagui, and this is another very common barnacle, becoming less common due to temperature rise. Balanus balanoides. So if you can see on this one, the bottom plate, the rostral plate, is very, very wide. And one to note here, the really important identifying feature for this barnacle is the lateral plate here. These 2 plates here are extremely crucial in trying to identify this barnacle, because they might just appear as a very faint line, basically. So we have these nice neat drawings of the nice neat plates, and then coming on to this, just to show you that inside a barnacle they are fairly complex animals. This is a fairly simple diagram, but I mean the bottom here is a substrate, which could be rock, it could be animal, it could be wood, it could be plastic. A lot of barnacles absolutely love plastic, by the way, as you'll see in a minute. So I've just shown this very simple diagram to kind of show you where the opercular plates are. So if you imagine those four plates I showed you just now in the operculum, the tergum and the scuta, they open up, and basically inside is the feeding apparatus here, the cirri. And then these are adductor muscles here, which open and close the opercular plates. So barnacles actually have very powerful muscles inside them. And I forgot to say that underneath the opercular plates here, there is what's called the tergal flaps. And you will see in a minute that they are incredibly beautiful. They have usually very brightly coloured, and each species has a different colour, different coloured tergal flaps. And to be honest, the only way you can definitively identify a species is really to look at the colour of the tergal flaps, unless the barnacle is very well preserved and you can see the plates very clearly. So these are the culprits here. So we've got 7 species. So I'll just start off again. The semi-Balanus balanoides, the Perforatus perforatus, which is the Volcano Barnacle, which is probably the easiest barnacle to identify. Then we have a very small barnacle, usually Stromia, or the warp barnacle, as it can be called. And then Kazama montagui, and Kazama stellatus, which are very closely related. In actual fact, until 1976, they were thought to be variations of the same species, and they were identified definitively by Professor Alan Southwood from the MBA that in actual fact they're 2 species. And then we have Balanus crenatus, and then we have the very, very common now non-native invasive barnacle from Australia, New Zealand, Austrominius modestus, or commonly known as Darwin's barnacle. It's quite a unique barnacle because it actually has 4 plates, which you may think actually makes it far easier to identify. Well, it does in many ways when the barnacle is pristine, but when it's eroded, you will see in a minute that actually can be quite tricky. So we have these nice neat drawings. It's all very easy. You look at that, you look at the barnacle, but of course you get onto the shore and that's kind of what you're faced with a lot of the time. A lot of sites are exposed to high wave action, and they quickly become eroded due to the calcium leaching out and spreading, and also you see here a lot of these barnacles are very pitted. That's due to interestingly a marine lichen. So these little black dots here are actually a lichen growing on the barnacle, which pits it actually. And you can also see, this is a picture I took last week actually in Plymouth. You can see here actually the plates on these particular barnacles, which are young, they're not particularly old ones, but already the plates have become eroded and they've become very thin and growing upwards. So they can change their shape quite dramatically. So if you start off with Austrominius, okay, so as I said, it's got 4 plates, and okay, there we go. So this is a picture I took a couple of years ago. They love plastic, like a lot of barnacles, I said. So these are actually pristine Austrominius. I think they're actually quite beautiful, actually, I must say. So a feature to note is you can see that they have a diamond-shaped operculum. But if you look from the side, you can just about see it on this one here. The opercular plates actually are rising up like a little kind of beak. In fact, a nickname for these guys is we call them beakies. So that's one way of identifying Austrominius, is that the plates actually are pointing upwards as opposed to flat for some Balanus, which also has a diamond-shaped operculum. Just to say straight away, actually, as you'll see in a minute, colour is not really an accurate identification guide, because they can be many colours actually. When they erode, they can go quite dirty grey. When they're younger, they can be very white, and so colour isn't a great guide, to be fair. So this is Austrominius, and I'll show you. So these are pristine on plastic, and that is the same species, but as you can see, it's very eroded and worn away, and it doesn't look quite so pretty as the other ones. Again, you can see the slightly elongated diamond-shaped operculum here, and you can still see the 4 plates. Okay, so the next one, which can easily be confused with the Austrominius, even though it's got 6 plates as opposed to 4, is the Semi-Balanus balanoides. It's called a northern rock barnacle common name because it favours colder water. Now, due to rising sea temperatures, as Nova will know all about, they are starting to kind of shift northwards in the UK, and they're becoming less common in the southwest. So they can be quite large. Colour, it says here, is grey, white, and sometimes yellow. In fact, I will show you some yellow ones in a second. The younger ones tend to be pearly white. When they start off, they have a very, very enlarged rostral plate, and then that kind of gets smaller, and the colour starts to become duller, and they usually kind of grey-white colour. But the thing to remember when identifying Semi-Balanus is this very large rostral plate compared to other barnacles. So if you look at that, and you look at the suture line here, It goes across straight, then dips down, and then you've got the two coronal plates here. That's the ones to look for. If you see those, it's definitely a semi-Balanus. Okay, so same barnacle, and this is the yellow form of it. These are quite pristine, and you can clearly see the very wide rostral plate. You can see the two coronal plates here, and you can clearly see the diamond-shaped operculum. So, you know, that's pretty clear. They are semi-Balanus there. In fact, this one here is slightly open. You can just see the some of the tergal flaps, which on this species actually is white. Okay, again, same species. Sorry, no, I'm incorrect there. Okay, so in this picture, most of these barnacles here are actually the Ostrom Aeneas. And I put it in this picture just to show you that the two often grow together. So most of these barnacles are the four-plated Darwin's barnacle, Ostrom Aeneas, and lo and behold, you got a semi-Balanus, looking nice and white, but as you can see, it's got 6 plates. So they can look quite similar, and they can be extremely difficult at times to differentiate. When the grey and the pitted and the crowded. So these are very white, and I say this really does show the difference between the two species, which you may find helpful. Okay. Now this is one of my favorite barnacles, actually. They are usually absolutely tiny, sometimes a couple of millimeters across. I was going to say, actually, that this particular one you will only find on the low shore. They tend to be more subtidal or low shore, and they're nearly always under stones. So basically, if you're on a low tide and you turn a stone over and you see lots of kind of little white kind of dots, it'll probably be these guys. Again, if you have a hand lens and you look at them close up, they're absolutely stunning. And they're quite weird compared to the other Acorn barnacles, because they actually have six ridge plates here. They look completely different from the other barnacles. Yeah, I think once you've seen one, you will see that they are quite unique. So here's a close-up of some a white form of them. They give you some idea of size. Actually, this is probably about 3 millimeters across, I would say. You can see the plates. You can see the 6 plates here. As I say, they are quite unique, so you're not likely to confuse them with any other barnacle, to be honest. But the difficulty with them is that they're pretty common barnacle. But having said that, some sites around the southwest of the UK, they aren't there. They're very common in my part of the world, in Tor Bay. In fact, they're very common, actually. Sometimes you can turn a decent sized stone over and literally be thousands on there. But they are very small. So, okay, so this is the same species. As you can see, it's a different color form. It's more browny, yellowish color. And again, they're quite beautiful, So they are very unique. As I said, they are very different from the other barnacles. So I think once you find some, you see some dots, you look at your hand lens, you will see that that's what they look like basically under a hand lens. And it's a water barnacle, or Austromia. Okay, so now we get to the tricky ones. So the next 2 species basically are the bane of my life, to be honest. The ones that actually were thought to be the same species until 1976. Very common barnacles. They are more barnacles of the higher shore. You can find on the low shore. But so here we have Kazama stellatus, which sometimes can be found on the high shore. You do find the odd one, actually. Again, you look at the diagram, and it seems fairly straightforward because they are unique in that they have a round or a oval operculum, and they have a smiley face. So the suture line actually can be very curved. It can be very dipped, hence the smiley face. Unfortunately, when you look at some of them, I don't want to confuse you with this, but this is what I find when I look at the MBA, the ones that look at the MBA, is that you can get stellatus that can be kind of kite shaped. They can still have a curved smiley face. On the other hand, they can be perfectly round, and they can have a fairly straight line across it they're not supposed to have. So they're kind of out there to make life difficult. To be honest, they can be quite tricky. But when you get one, particularly the older specimens, they tend to be more round. The operculum, it can be perfectly round actually, with a big smiley face. In business, that's a stellatus. As it says on here, not to be confused with Kazama montagui, which again, you look at a nice neat drawing, seems fairly straightforward. So the rostral plate here is much narrower. It's got a kite-shaped operculum, and the suture line dips up, or quite usually actually goes straight across. So they're similar, but they are different. So that's stellatus. So I now show you some stellatus here with some Ostrom Aeneas. And as you can see, these guys are open, ready for feeding. And I put this picture in to show the really nice round operculums here. You got a lovely dipped suture line, smiley face. They're opening up, and you can see the beautiful colours of the tergal flaps inside. What's happened here? Oh, sorry. What's happened here? Oh, sorry, guys. It's gone right to the end of the. Oh, sorry. I apologise for this, but it somehow shot past loads of. Okay. I think it's probably some using the mouse, which I wasn't going to do actually. Okay. So you've now got a preview, which there we go. Okay, so we're back to the stellatus. Okay, so this is a typical kind of view of what they look like in the field. I took these at Dawlish last year, and I don't know why, but the colours, the ones at Dawlish, are particularly beautiful. They have this kind of translucent quality. So in here you have mainly Kazama barnacles, and most of them actually are stellatus. So if you see here, even if the plates are all gone, they're all eroded. You can clearly see the oval operculum, and you can see the nice smiley face. And yeah, some more of these. Okay, there's one they're a bit crooked, but it's still got a smiley face. Okay, so these are nearly all stellatus. I think this one here, just to show you what I mean earlier, I think this may well be a montagui, because you see the line here is straight across, even though actually I can still see the faint outline of a kite kind of shaped here, but the bottom has become rounded. So as I say, it really is fine attention to detail. If I was looking at a quadra at the MBA, I would probably give that as a montagui, even though it's rounded. But most of these are stellatus. They're very, very attractive barnacles. Now we go on to the montagui, which are similar, as I say. So as I say, just to reiterate, kite-shaped operculum, the line goes across, doesn't dip, and they have a narrow bottom plate, as it says there. Okay, so this is a picture I took this week. These are nearly all montagui. So again, the plates have gone, they've become completely eroded. So what you're looking at, the only way I would identify these barnacles is to look at the suture line, which you can see on these guys straight across. The other interesting thing actually is when you look at a photograph, if the incline of the photo is slightly tilted, it can give the illusion that the line actually is kind of bent, whereas the actual fact is probably straight. So you have to take that into account. But if you look at the hand lens on the shore, it's probably easier, to be honest. So there we are. We have a whole mass of them stuck together, all eroded away, but you can clearly see the lines, and that's what you're looking at. So a couple of these, there's the Colossus there. So we have Montaguae, Montaguae all around, and you got a Colossus sitting there amongst them. So if you look for, as I keep saying, you look for the smiley face or the straight line to identify these guys. Okay, and just to show you a different form of the same barnacle, so there's Montaguae, and this is what it's supposed to look like. This one's a bit pitted. I took it a couple of days ago in Torquay. You can see the kite-shaped operculum here. You can see the straight line, and you can actually make out the 6 plates. Actually, here's the join lines here. So it's got 6 plates. So that is what they're supposed to look like, and sometimes you do find them in pristine condition. They're very attractive. The plates are very, very nice to look at. But again, there's the same species there. The plates have eroded away. So same barnacle, but these look different. But again, keep looking at the suture line. Okay. Ben, can you just remind me of the time, because I haven't got my watch to hand, which is a basic error.
It's 6:33 at the moment.
Oh, okay. Okay, right. I better crack on. Right. Okay. So this is another This is another subtitled low shore species, Balanus crenatus. And the easy way of identifying these guys is from the side, and they, as it says here, it kind of leans to one side, and they have these kind of ridges sticking up. Actually, they also have a diamond-shaped operculum, but the opercular plates actually are yellow, usually yellow-orange. So that makes it a lot easier to work out. So these guys will be found under stones mainly on a low shore, on a low tide. If you go into the subtidal and turn some stones over, you'll almost certainly find some. They're pretty common. They're a pretty common barnacle subtidally, and they also love plastic. They often find them on fish boxes and things like that. So this is an underwater shot of some crenatus I found last week. Again, so it's got a more of a tear-shaped kind of diamond-shaped operculum. They're usually white. Actually, these don't tend to change colour. They're usually very white in colour. And the plates inside the operculum, as you can see, are kind of yellowy, orangey. So I don't know why, but I also find actually that they don't erode so much, but I just thought the obvious thing to say there is they're not basically sitting higher up on the shore on rocks being crashed onto by waves, which erodes them. So these guys spend most of the time underwater, so they stay pristine really. So here's a close-up of one, quite a large. I think this is quite a large one actually. And you can see the plates here. You can make the 6 plates out. And say what gives it away is it's slightly tear-shaped diamond, and the colour of the opercular plates. So low shore barnacle, you won't find them any further up the shore than that, dead low. So this is probably the easiest barnacle to identify. Although having said that, the juvenile form of this can be tricky. So this is the very common volcano barnacles. You will not find these guys further up the shore. You find them in rock pools on the low shore, and you will find them subtidally as well. They're quite a common feature on walls and harbours, lower down the wall, a bit at the bottom of the wall at harbour, on the low shore height. Well, the name speaks for itself. So volcano-like shape, and they have a very small operculum, actually, 4 tiny plates. So they're pretty distinctive. This is typically what they look like. The earlier specimens like this, they can live for quite a long time, by the way, tend to be kind of grey, dirty, very ridged like this. The opercular plates are more kind of yellowy. In fact, if you photograph them underwater, they are actually very beautiful. They can be all kinds of rainbow colours, and they're iridescent. So these are some young ones I took about a year ago, and you can see them just opening up. This isn't a rock pool. You can see them just opening up, ready to feed. And again, you can see the tergal flaps here, which again, beautiful colours. And you can see how small the opening is here, the operculum. Okay. Okay, I'll just show you this. So just to stress that you're only going to find certain species at a certain shore height. Okay, so for instance, this is a rock face at Meadfoot in Torquay. So right at the top here would be the splash zone, the very high tide height. Approximately here would be the high tide height. This area here would be kind of middle shore, quite to middle shore, and then this area down here would be low shore. Okay, so at the top here, where you're only going to have small amounts of water covering it. The only species you're likely to find would be the Catamus montagui, because they are perfectly adapted to live out of water for actually months on end. They can be more or less dry for 3 months or so, just the splashing of water on them to survive. So if you're looking at top of rocks, you're almost certainly going to find the montaguis in large numbers. You will find some stellatus up there as well, down on the high shore, some stellatus down into the middle shore. And then in the bottom, so this is the low shore here. This is where you're going to find the semi-Balanus, you're going to find the Chronatus, and you will find the volcanoes, definitely, because they're very common species. So it's important to stress that if you're doing a survey and you think, oh, I'll go and look for some montagui now, there isn't much point of looking down here, to be honest. You need to look up high on the rocks. This is montagui right on top of that big rock. This is black tar lichen here, so that indicates that actually that this rock face actually has very little water going onto it. So these are all montagui. Maybe yes, they are. Yeah. So just on the high shore height, just below those guys, again, we got some nicely pitted and eroded montagui again. Moving down that rock face, middle shore now. So you got a few species. So here we got some semi-Balanus, where you can see that coronal plate there to give it away. You got an Austrominius here. Austrominius, a very successful invasive barnacle because they can adapt to all kinds of extremes of habitat, freshwater, almost freshwater, very salt on the open coast, and they can live at most shore heights actually, apart from the very top of the shore. This is middle shore. We're lucky to find, you're going to find these semi-Balanus there. And then at the bottom of that big rock, the low shore, you got mainly the perforatus or the volcanoes. Okay, so I thought it was important to show this. Actually, this is probably the best online resource out there. It's by an amazing guy called Ian Smith. He's an amateur marine biologist, and he does incredible microscopic photography. And I think this is kind of like a definitive resource, to be honest. So there's the web address. In fact, if you just search for British Acorn Barnacles, it'll come up as Glaucus in the search. So click onto that, and then basically you click onto each species, and there's a absolutely incredible, obsessive amount of detail on there, accompanied by amazing photography. So yeah, if you want to spend a bit of time looking at the site, I would totally recommend it. Okay, so just a little plug here. So myself, my colleague Toby, who's watching also, we are part of a marine interest group that we formed beginning this year called the Shores of South Devon. We have a website and which I haven't got the website address here, a big error. So we have a Facebook page, the Shores of South Devon, and we have a website, the Shores of South Devon. And also, if you've got a minute or two, have a look on Facebook for Mike's Marine Magic. That's my own personal page where I've got lots and lots of pictures of not only barnacles, but most marine fauna. And then, you know, if you're getting a bit fed up with barnacles, you need to realise that even the great man himself actually started to hate them. So Darwin, of course, actually was responsible for the taxonomic system that we have now. In mainly Darwin actually based from the basis of understanding the different species of barnacles. And actually, if you remember, the Austrominius barnacle is actually common name is called Darwin's barnacle. So they can be frustrating to identify, but I can say to you, they are absolutely fascinating animals. And what I will say also is, if you're out and about on the shore, you're looking into rock pools, have a look to see underwater and look to see if any of the barnacles are feeding, because if you watch them feeding, it is quite amazing actually. Or just look at them with the hand lens, as I keep saying, and they're absolutely incredible to look at in detail. And they're all different. Most people think barnacles all look the same, and superficially, of course, they do. So I just tried to illustrate tonight in basic kind of detail that they're all in fact quite different. So I think that's probably me done. So
thanks very much, Mike. Yeah, I would say if everyone would like to unmute their microphones, we can give Mike a short clap for a really wonderful talk. We'll do that, or I can unmute everyone. Clap.
Thank you. That was very good.
Yeah, very good.
Okay, I think I've been better actually, but the technical glitches there a couple of times, but
that was good.
Charm, Mike.
Cool. I'll
so
just
stop share then. Stop share. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Sorry, I've just muted everyone, which means I've muted Mike as well. So I'm just going to unmute. Mike, where are you, Mike? I can't find you in the. There we go.
Can I ask a really basic question?
Yeah, I was going to say we're going to do questions now. I was going to say one thing we could do is if people have got photos of barnacles that they want to share and have Mike's opinion on, you can start looking through your files now. But we'll start fielding questions. I noticed Ben got in 2 on the chat before the talk was even over, but I think as you're already talking, Sophie.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I jumped in there, Ben.
You can go, but I was going to say, if anyone has a question, just either put up their hand or enter it into the chat, however you'd like. Yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yes.
Yeah, sorry, I should have put my hand up, shouldn't I? So, Mike, this is a really basic question. So, the term Acorn Barnacle, what does that refer to? Because I see Acorn Barnacle sometimes against a species in a book, but it jumps around between species. So, what is an Acorn Barnacle? What does that mean?
Okay. So basically, the acorn. I'm not entirely sure. Actually, I probably should know this. Why they're called acorns? Actually, I don't know if Ben knows this. I'm not entirely sure. They're called acorn barnacles. But the acorn barnacle group is essentially the kind of normal-looking barnacles on a shore. Essentially, okay. I omitted to talk about a couple of other types of barnacle, which actually are on the species list for the Rockpool Project Crustacean Survey. The other very large group of barnacles are the Goose Barnacles, yeah, which are essentially stalked, or they're called peduncle barnacles. They're on stalks, essentially. There's quite a few species globally. They tend, there is only one species that I know of, actually, Parasitic Barnacles, which is actually on the Crustacean Survey. I think, as far as I can see, I've never found one, but it's the only species of goose barnacle that actually grows on the shore, because mainly they attach themselves to floating objects in the in the oceans, and they're quite amazing. I mean, if in the winter mainly, you might come across a log or a piece of flotsam. It's absolutely covered in thousands of goose barnacles. So that's the other main group of barnacles, and the other one that I forgot to mention is also on the species list for the Crustacean Survey. Is called Saculina carcinea, sorry. Yeah, basically, it doesn't look like a barnacle whatsoever. It's a parasitic barnacle. There is a whole group of parasitic barnacles that attach themselves to crustaceans. The one you might find is the Saculina, which they basically burrow themselves into common shore crabs mainly. So if you find a poor unfortunate crab with a great big lump under it, which is basically not an egg mass, it's a kind of grey kind of lump. It's actually a male parasitic barnacle, and they're particularly gruesome and nasty and horrible, I think. But the reason they're actually called barnacles or classed as barnacles is because they actually have the same life cycle in the plankton. And that's why they're grouped in with the acorn barnacles. So coming back to your question, acorn barnacles are basically the normal looking ones you see on a shore.
Okay.
Just
really
think acorn barnacles, the normal ones, and then think of goose barnacles as the ones on a stalk. Okay, is that okay?
I think, Mike, you need to
thanks so much.
be careful though, because I think where Sophie's question's coming from is quite often guidebooks will say like something like semi-balanoides, they'll call it acorn barnacle as if it's just that species. But obviously, what you said is right. It's a whole taxonomic group, but I think it's quite common for particular species to be called it, which is confusing for people.
It is confusing. But that's great, thank you. That's completely cleared it up.
It is confusing. But if you actually go onto that a barnacle guide resource that I showed you just now, they're even called acorn barnacles on there. But it's just a term. It's just a term from a very large group of barnacles globally, which basically are ones that live intertidally, essentially. Yeah, so they're not stalked and they're not parasitic. Just normal barnacle.
Just on rocks.
Yeah.
Thank you. Cheers, Mike.
Okay.
Cool. I think you answered one of Ben's questions already about the Saculina. Ben's got another one, which is, did you want to ask it yourself, Ben? And if anyone else has further questions, just post in the chat. I've got a question, or type it out if you don't want to speak.
Yeah, have Montagua and Stellatus got exactly the same geographical distribution, Mike?
I saw your question there, Ben. Yeah, I don't know actually. I mean, they're both very common. Well, actually, I don't know because, like, locally in the southwest, they can be a very common species in some sites, and then other sites you don't find them. Whereas I think Montaguide, I would have thought, is a much more common species. I mean, they're incredibly common, actually. I mean, any high shore you will find Montaguide. I don't know, actually, like looking it up, Ben, actually, but I from my own experience, I don't find so many stellatus. So I would say, actually, the answer to that is probably they haven't got the exact same geographical distribution. But they are found all around the, as far as I know, they're found all around the UK. But it's one to check out.
Yeah, I had a little look before I asked, but I couldn't find. They definitely overlap a lot, don't they?
Yeah, they overlap a lot. Yeah, I mean, yeah. As I said earlier, I mean, they were thought to be the same species until '76, which is interesting. Yeah. I mean, I would say Montaguide has probably got a. My thought is Montaguide has probably got a wider geographical distribution. That's my thought on it, but I shall check it out later.
I guess my question was coming from a speciation point of view, because I also saw they are good species, like genetically they are completely distinct, and they must have, by the looks of it, they must have evolved separated without being geographically separated into different species.
Yeah, seems
to be, which is quite. Not
well, they are distinct. They are distinct species. The actual tergal flaps, the coloration and markings on them actually are just very slightly different. So there is a difference. But yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Any more?
So you mentioned the colour of the tergal flaps was a key identification feature. Is there something documented? Yeah. Again, is it on that Glaucus website? Does it talk about that?
Yeah, it does. I mean, it describes the colours. What I'm saying is that it's not the most accurate guide, because when most barnacle species on a shore, they're an exposed site. The white gets eroded, and most of them become grey and dingy. Actually, the ones underwater will retain a colour. I mean, as I said, the Crenatus, being a subtidal species, is usually very white, because they don't basically live on the exposed shore. They live under the water, so they're white. I guess what I should say actually is some species colour can be a guide, but I think if you're looking at the species, if you're looking intertidally, I wouldn't rely on that. You really just need to rely. Well, I showed you earlier actually a very white form of the Balanus, and I also showed you a very yellow form of the Balanus. I'm not entirely sure why there are different colour forms, to be honest, why some are different colours like that. I mean, well, yeah, it's quite an interesting subject, actually. So the Ostrom Aeneas, which is around my part of the world, and native in the UK, is a very invasive barnacle. More often than not, they're actually white. But as I showed you earlier, some of the pictures I took, they can be grey. They can be very grey. But I think the true colour is white, actually. Now, where I live here in Newton Abbot, I'm quite near the River Tean, and I go and actually look at them here, almost in fresh water, actually. And they are incredibly white, and they're huge. They're absolutely huge compared to the coastal ones, because they're further spaced out and they grow bigger. And yeah, they look quite different from the. So sitting up here in fresh water, almost in a nice gentle river, with hardly any exposure, they're big and white. They're okay, but on a shore, they're very grey and dark. Yeah. Right. So as I keep saying, that you really have to look at the plates. If there's no plates, you look at the opercular shape, and you look at the tergal-scutal suture with the line that goes across. That is really the only. That's the only thing you can see sometimes, is that line going across the shape of the operculum. So that is really what you should look at first of all.
Okay, thank you.
That's okay. Yeah.
We've got a chat message from, I assume it's Jules. I'm not quite sure. Do you want to speak, or would you like me to read it out?
Yeah, no, I was just wondering, going back to the geographical distribution, whether there was any results from CoCoast, because we collected quite a lot of data on barnacles from that, but I sort of lost track as to whether there was any maps or anything from it. Does anyone know?
I think actually, I think Ben's probably the best person to answer that.
I don't know if anyone.
It's a bit of a moot point about the.
Oops, sorry. I don't know if anyone's produced any final maps. There was a nice sort of glossy report. I don't know if you saw it at the end of.
Yeah, I couldn't remember.
I can't remember if it had individual species maps or not in there. But looking at MBN, all the CoCoast data is on MBN now. So
Okay.
the possibility of the maps on MBN themselves are a bit difficult to look at, but there's a possibility of downloading the data and mapping it out. It could be that Stellatus and Montaguai are found all around the UK, but still have slightly different distributions beyond the UK as well. So.
Cool.
I've just been
by the way.
Hi, how you doing, Jim?
I've just been on GBIF, and it seems like Stellatus gets a bit more into the Mediterranean, but that's really it. There's not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, they're both invasive elsewhere in the UK, so I feel like we've been giving the Australian barnacle a bit of a hard time being the invasive one, where actually all the others have gone everywhere else in the world.
Semi-Balanus as well.
Yeah, I think so. I didn't Google semi-Balanus, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're all being transported everywhere in ballast water.
Yeah.
I mean, the shore crab is one of the worst invasive species in the world for our nice native crabs. They're actually causing carnage elsewhere.
So is there any evidence that the invasive barnacles are causing any sort of negative impact on native ones?
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, some parts, some areas, they are by far the dominant species now. I mean, near where I live here, Timoth. I mean, on the open coast, they are the dominant species. My own thought is that they probably are displacing the native barnacles actually. The reason I say that is because the reason they're so successful is that the native species actually tend to reproduce once a year, whereas the Austrominius can actually reproduce up to 4 times a year, and they can tolerate, like most invasive species, they can tolerate a wide range of conditions. So what I'm finding is that you go out to a shore and you'll see a whole patch of barnacles have been cleaned off because of sand scour, or quite usually that. And then when the sand actually then reduces again, because around my area here, we have very dynamic sand shifts. So I mean, I can see I know of whole patches where there used to be some of Balanus populations have now completely gone. And they've died off because the sand smothered them and killed them, and they've just gone away. And what seems to be happening is that the Austrominius move in.
Right.
So I would say actually yes, I would say that they are having an effect in that they fill basically spaces that other barnacle species vacate. So as I say, if they can reproduce 4 times a year as opposed to once, then they're everywhere basically. So I would say they are invasive, and I would say they're affecting maybe some of the native species. Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
We have just hit 7 o'clock, so what I'll say is, if you do need to go, feel free to. I think we'll have one more last sort of clap for Mike. But I don't know if you want to keep talking, Mike, or if it's up to you if people have got more questions. But I think you do deserve another clap, so we'll do that now.
Oh, do I?
That was very good. That was very informative. Thank you.
Thanks
Well, I
very
didn't
much.
get a boo, so I suppose that's quite good, you know. Yeah, I mean, if there's any more questions people want to ask, I'm happy to chat about it. If you want to, I don't mind. I don't know how long we got left on the event.
We could go on all night if you wanted to, but we have to draw it to
You
a
may not
close.
want. You may not want to. You may not want to do that, Ben. No. So.
I do have another
any
question.
more questions? Okay. Okay.
You've spoken a lot about the sort of differences in morphology between different species to help identify the different species. Do you know? Is there any sort of functional significance? Does it make a difference to what the barnacles are actually doing, ecologically speaking? Whether they've got a diamond shape or a kite-shaped operculum, does it matter?
Yeah, that's an interesting question as well. I mean, I don't know. I mean, if you think about the warp barnacle, which is morphologically is quite different from the other barnacles as I was showing earlier.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're very common species, so they seem to do pretty well. I think in terms of I can't personally see it's the actual morphology of each species. I think it's more the kind of abiotic factors, isn't it? Is can they tolerate wave conditions?
Okay.
Can they tolerate being out of water for a long time, desiccation?
Mm-hmm.
It's that kind of stuff, isn't it? Which makes a barnacle or any species successful or not. I have looked at this before. I mean, obviously, the Montaguai, I think are amazing because just a couple of days ago I was in Torquay looking at some concrete steps, and right at the top of the very top step there, you just see a few scattered tiny little Montaguai. Basically, they must hardly get any water at all, and it's quite. So I would have thought the design of the plates and the shape enables them to close up extremely tightly to keep the moisture in for months on end. So, I mean, clearly we're talking adaptation here, and yeah, I guess so. I mean, I guess if you're going to be on a high shore like that, battered by waves and then out of water for months on end, they tend to be a smaller species. So I guess if you're smaller, then there's less chance you're going to lose moisture or you're going to be washed off. Whereas the volcano barnacles are the UK's largest barnacle. They're mainly subtidals. They're not exposed to the same stresses. So yeah, so the design is different and designed for be on the low shore. So if that makes sense.
Yeah.
We just had one person ask if stuff's going to be future events are going to be shared and on Facebook and so forth. And yes, everything we've shared on Facebook, on our Twitter and so forth. So keep in contact where you can. And yes, we'll be putting this on YouTube, and we'll share that throughout everywhere we can as well. Has anyone got any final thoughts they'd like to share, or?
Just thanks for the support on the Rockpool project in bits and pieces. It's been a very interesting project. So thanks very much to you and Ben and anybody else who's on from that. It's good.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Martin, for everything that you've done, and thanks for everyone else that's been involved, particularly with the Crustacean project. It's been great fun, and Christoph's done a great job leading it. So I hope you've enjoyed being involved with it.
Yeah, no, it's been good. Thank you.
I'm just reading your question now, Ben. Sorry, Jules. I'm not too sure if is it a question or not. Sorry.
No, not a question. Just I missed the whole start of the project because I had the dreaded virus, and I was on furlough, so I haven't been in the southwest, but I'm back doing 2 days a week. So yeah, you sent me a message ages ago saying we should chat about working together.
Okay.
So, yeah,
we should chat about working together, definitely, Jules. Give me a buzz whenever you're back at work or whatever, and then we can do that. Even though you've missed what we've been doing, has been like development work, really, to develop the survey, and we've basically got some good results and made decisions on how we're going to push forward with it. So we'll be looking to announce that in August. So it'd be good to chat to you before then, if possible.
Cool. Okay, good. And thanks, Mike.
You're welcome. I'm just typing actually to everyone that thanks for listening, but just appreciate that barnacles actually is a very big subject. So it is slightly challenging trying to squeeze it into half an hour or so.
Nice one. Okay, thanks everybody.
Great.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
everyone.
Take care.
Thanks, Mike.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.